Chapter 49 to 50. As night fell on the third day, Shirou cast aside his caster guise and resolved to take the fight to his opponent. But before he could launch his attack, he needed a new disguise. Caster had worn an Ultraman leather jacket and a black cloak, but Shirou had a different persona in mind. He would pose as the master of Berserker, Spartacus, and to do that, he needed an appropriate outfit. After browsing a department store, Shirou found what he was looking for, a Kamen Rider ZO leather suit. This show was released on 1993 and was still popular at the time. Shirou found it more affordable than the Ultraman jacket and used some of his special funds to cover the cost. Shirou knew he owed a debt of gratitude to Iskandar, who had provided him with the financial support he needed to buy the suit. Iskandar had taken a hefty sum of 50,000 yen from Waver, a significant amount in 1993. Shirou couldn't help but wonder how Waver had managed to restrain himself from killing Iskandar after that. He had chosen the Kamen Rider ZO leather suit as his new disguise, and it was primarily blue in color, resembling a beetle. The suit's red compound eyes only enhanced this effect, making Shirou appear even more like a member of the Matu family. This realization was all the more unsettling to him, given his long-held belief that the Matu family was obsessed with bugs. Shirou knew that first impressions could be powerful, and this appearance was sure to have an impact. With Spartacus by his side, Shirou set out from his home, ready to strike fear into the hearts of his enemies. The Berserker team was planning to cause trouble, with a powerful servant and a cunning master in their midst, Spartacus and Matu Shirou. The weak have been given swords and shields, while the mad heroes have been given eyes and brains. With this complementary combination, they're invincible. Shirou considered his options, wondering whether he should pay a visit to the Tosaka residence and stir up trouble, perhaps even getting under the skin of that arrogant golden servant. But after some contemplation, he decided against it. Instead, he focused his attention on his third most hated target, Diarmuid Uadwibni. At the top of Shirou's list of hated individuals was Gilgamesh, who had forced him into the Holy Grail War, followed closely by Kiritsugu, who had almost sent him to the heavens. Gilgamesh was the only one who knew Shirou's true identity, and Shirou was well aware that even Spartacus might not be able to defeat him. He had seen firsthand how Gilgamesh had dealt with Spartacus in the past, once by overpowering him with a giant sword, once by trapping him with shields, and once again by using a giant sword. Shirou knew that if he were to bring Spartacus to a fight against Gilgamesh, it would be a complete defeat. As for Kiritsugu, his whereabouts were unknown. Even if they were to attack the castle of Einsburn, there was no guarantee that Spartacus's physical body could withstand Saber's noble phantasm. In the end, Diarmuid seemed like the best option. Unlike Gilgamesh and Saber, he had no anti-fortress noble phantasm or bug abilities, relying solely on his strong martial arts skills. This made him a formidable opponent, but one who could be defeated. For Shirou, he was the ideal hunting target. Most importantly, Shirou had nearly lost his life twice at the hands of Diarmuid, so he felt a strong desire for revenge. With these thoughts in mind, Shirou led Spartacus towards Kaneth's workshop, disguised as the Kamen Rider and posing as Matu Shirou. But upon arriving, they found that Kaneth was not present in the International Hotel's magical workshop. His materials and belongings were still there, but the man himself was nowhere to be found. In frustration, Shirou and Spartacus caused a ruckus, destroying all the magical items in the workshop before leaving with Spartacus. Suddenly, Shirou sensed the presence of a servant lurking around him and a gaze watching him, and his brow furrowed in response. But a hint of a mocking smile played at the corners of his mouth. Did they still think he was the weak caster of the past, who could only boast and bluster? It was time for these servants to see just how powerful he had become. "Come, Spartacus!" he shouted, his voice filled with determination. "The oppressors are here! Let's defeat them together!" "Oh! Spartacus in his spiritual body let out a cry. Shirou chose a sparsely populated suburban forest as the battlefield. He allowed Spartacus to materialize while he stood at a safe distance waiting for the enemy to arrive. He knew that he couldn't defeat servants on his own, but as a master, he could use the strength of his demi-servant to bully the Magus. However, he decided not to fuse with his Saint Graph immediately. He had two reasons for this decision. First, once he fused his Saint Graph, the servant's aura, particularly Wisdom of Mortal, would reveal his identity. Second, he wanted to use the enemy's arrogance to his advantage. By waiting until they thought they had won, he could catch them off guard and increase the chances of killing them directly. This was the true way of assassination. Boom, boom, boom! The sky was filled with thunder and lightning, and a chariot rode on blue thunderbolts, landing in front of Shirou and the others with the force of a meteor. Shirou's eyebrows furrowed as he looked at the grand figure on the chariot. He had not expected to attract the attention of Iskandar, one of the most powerful servants. The heroic figure materialized as Berserker. "Are you the one calling out to this king?" Iskandar asked with a smile as he looked at Spartacus. "Are you willing to join under my banner?" "It's a shame, Conqueror King," Shirou spoke on his behalf. "My Berserker has no fondness for rulers. He is a symbol of freedom." "Oh," Iskandar's gaze shifted to Shirou, noting the common rider suit he was wearing. He raised an eyebrow and asked with interest, "Berserker's master, is that outfit you're wearing the clothing of this country?" Shirou nodded, saying, "It's something like that." In his mind, this suit was also from Japan, so it could be considered Japanese clothing. "It's pretty good," Iskandar said, stroking his chin and showing an interested expression. He then turned to look at Waver, who was standing beside him. Waver cowered like a scared cat, protectively covering his pocket and glaring fiercely. "I'm telling you, I'm broke. I'm broke. Don't even think about it. This is wartime. Who has the mind to join the war carelessly like you? Look at Berserker, he's giving you an evil eye. Don't think about attacking my wallet." "Oh my, you're so petty." Iskandar patted Waver's shoulder with a carefree expression, pointing at Shirou and Spartacus, and laughed cheerfully. "Who knows? Today's enemy might be tomorrow's friend. That's just your way of thinking. They came here with the intention of killing us," Waver shouted with a gloomy expression, but his words were met with loud laughter from Iskandar. Shirou's gaze was intense as he looked at Iskandar, taking note of his large heart and generous attitude. But even so, Shirou couldn't deny the fact that he himself had come with the sole intention of taking their lives. He knew that in this deadly game there was no room for mercy. If he didn't kill his enemies, they would kill him. So he steeled himself for the battle ahead, knowing that he could not afford to show any weakness or hesitation. Shirou shouted, "Spartacus, let's go!" Spartacus, wielding a razor-sharp sword and radiating determination, charged towards Iskandar like a fierce god. His muscular form towered over the battlefield. Boom! Boom! Spartacus's bulky frame began to pound the ground as he ran, each step causing the earth to tremble beneath him. "Did you see that? They didn't even consider—" Waver was about to berate Iskandar for his naivety, but when he saw the king's expression, he was taken aback. Iskandar was laughing, a joyful smile on his face. "Excellent! The shining star of rebellion, illuminating the earth. You are rising up against the true oppressor, the king who seeks to conquer and subjugate the entire world, Iskandar." Iskandar unsheathed his long sword and laughed as he pulled the reins of his chariot, the Gordius wheel. In the next instant, it roared to life like divine thunder, hurtling towards the charging Spartacus. Boom! Iskandar held the reins of the Gordius wheel, guided by the power of two divine bulls as it collided with Spartacus with tremendous force. In an instant, Spartacus was sent flying, his bones cracking as he was thrown. His burly body was covered in scorch marks from the intense strikes of lightning. Seated on his chariot, Iskandar brandished his sword and shouted, "Rise up, shining star of rebellion! If you fall now, then accept the tyranny of this king!" "Oh, oh, 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 oh!" Spartacus rose to his feet, his presence growing stronger with each passing moment. His bones realigned with a series of cracks, his burly frame expanding even further, his muscles bulging like mountains, making others feel insignificant in comparison. Spartacus let out a wild laugh, brandishing his long sword like a hero of retribution. Charging toward the greatest sinner in the world, his spirits high, he bellowed, "Oppressor, oh, 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 oh! That's right, I am an oppressor, a tyrant. My kingdom is built on tyranny, and oppression is my greatest achievement." Iskandar laughed as he pulled the reins of the chariot, which in an instant was covered in thunderbolts and lightning pillars, charging toward Spartacus with great force. With a deafening roar, the giant and the divine chariot collided in a blaze of magical energy and thunderbolts. The two forces intersected and surged, creating a powerful storm of destruction that filled the air. In an instant, the space around them seemed to freeze, as if time itself had been suspended in the face of such raw power. Boom! A sound like thunderclaps echoed out as the two forces collided, creating a storm that was like a typhoon erupting at the point of intersection. The surrounding trees and grass were lifted 3 feet high, caught up in the powerful winds generated by the collision, like a tidal wave. The scene was one of utter destruction, as the earth shook and the sky blackened, consumed by the raging storm of magical energy and thunderbolts. It was as if the very fabric of reality was being torn asunder by the sheer force of the battle. This time, Spartacus was not sent flying as he expanded even more, his body now able to withstand the crushing force of the Gordius wheel. Iskandar was taken aback, but he spoke with excitement. "To be able to withstand the crushing force of my Gordius wheel with just your flesh and blood is truly impressive, but my Gordius wheel is not so easily withstood." Iskandar laughed and swung the reins again, calling forth even more power from his chariot. "Moo!" The two divine bulls raised their heads and let out a long cry, exerting even more strength and their bodies becoming even more thunderous, like a clap of thunder crashing towards Spartacus. The overwhelming power of the Gordius wheel slowly pushed towards Spartacus, the thunder around the war chariot lashing at him like a whip, leaving behind numerous wounds. Spartacus clung to the heads of the two divine bulls with his hands, but his body was gradually forced back by the power of the Gordius wheel. His huge feet were like bulldozers, destroying a piece of farmland. "No, this won't do!" Shirou quickly realized that although Spartacus became stronger as he sustained injuries and was skilled in counterattacks, the crushing force of the Gordius wheel was too fast for him to keep up. Shirou feared that Spartacus would be crushed by the wheel before he could unleash his full power. "Support! The hands that wield the sword and shield require the support of his brain and eyes." Shirou's expression grew serious as he looked at Waver on the Gordius wheel. Afraid of being recognized, he projected a spear instead of a sword. With a wave of his hand, Shirou projected a spear, and it materialized in a flash of light, hurtling towards its target. Hearing a strange sound of breaking air, Waver quickly turned his head and saw a spear rushing towards him, the sight almost scaring him out of his wits. Just as the spear was about to strike him, Iskandar swiftly waved his hand and his sword split Shirou's projected spear into two. The shattered pieces of the spear falling harmlessly to the ground, then disintegrated. Waver breathed a sigh of relief, but then turned to Shirou with a glare. "Sneak attacking me? Is that how you fight?" Before Shirou could respond, Iskandar interjected. He placed a hand on Waver's shoulder and chuckled. "Relax, kid. This is war. Things are different here." Waver was furious that his own servant was helping someone else speak against him. Seeing that Iskandar didn't even bother to get angry at him and instead had a carefree and cheerful laugh, Shirou didn't let it affect him either, and continued to project various weapons as they materialized in a flurry of light, raining down upon Waver in a relentless barrage. Waver was overwhelmed by the constant stream of projectiles, and in fear, he sought refuge behind Iskandar. Crouching down and hugging his head, he trembled with fear. Seeing Waver's distress, Iskandar had no choice but to spare some energy to chop off Shirou's projected weapons. He laughed and said, "Your attack method is really like Caster." Shirou's heart tightened, confirmed that he did not merge his Saint Graph, then suppressed his voice and said, "Caster is using noble phantasms, but I'm only using basic projection magic." "Perhaps," Iskandar laughed. At this moment, Spartacus finally absorbed enough damage, his power increased, and his body expanded to a giant size of 10 meters. "Oh! Oh! 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 Oh!" Spartacus shouted, and like ropes, his hands grabbed the heads of the two divine bulls. Using the strength of his waist, he pulled with all his might. Iskandar's eyes narrowed, and without hesitation, he grabbed Waver's collar and jumped off the chariot. The next moment, boom! Spartacus, his muscles rippling with power, gracefully executed a backflip, flinging the two majestic bulls and the chariot behind him with ease. Without hesitation, he seized the heads of the divine bulls, and with a resounding crack, he snapped their necks, felling them both in one swift motion. Iskandar pushed Waver aside and surveyed the two divine bulls that Spartacus had killed. A hint of annoyance crossed his face as he scratched his head. "I didn't think it was possible to destroy the Gordius wheel like this. It's quite frustrating." "Oh, oh, 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 oh!" With a fierce cry, Spartacus rose to his feet, his towering 10-meter frame exuding raw power and strength as he let out a deafening roar. "All right!" Shirou secretly shouted in his mind. "I can win!" With his chariot destroyed, Iskandar's last resort is to activate his noble phantasm, Ionioi Hetairoi. However, as a reality marble, it is uncertain what will occur when it clashes with another reality marble, such as Shirou's unlimited blade works. The outcome of the clash between the two reality marbles is uncertain, and there are several possibilities of how the situation might play out. One possibility is that one reality marble will override the other. Another possibility is that they may coexist. The result could also be determined by the difference in magical energy between the two, the degree of mysticism, or the strength of the mental image of the user. Regardless, it is still uncertain as to which outcome will transpire. Even though Shirou is uncertain about how his reality marble, unlimited blade works, will fare against Iskandar's noble phantasm, Ionioi Hetairoi. However, with Spartacus by his side, the plan becomes clear. If Iskandar activates Ionioi Hetairoi, Shirou will let Spartacus charge through, and at a crucial moment, he will activate his own reality marble, unlimited blade works, and launch a surprise attack on Iskandar. As long as there is a brief pause in Ionioi Hetairoi, the towering Spartacus will have enough time to break through and eliminate Iskandar. A double fatality. The chariot has been destroyed. Waver looked at the debris of the chariot and felt a sense of disappointment. He couldn't help but feel that if he were more useful, if Iskandar had not had to use some of his energy to protect him, the chariot may not have been destroyed. He looked up at Iskandar, ready to express his regret, but was caught off guard when he saw Iskandar laughing. Even though the chariot was destroyed, and they were in a dire situation, Iskandar did not blame Waver. Instead, his face was filled with a conquering smile. As they stood there, the towering Spartacus charged toward them, roaring loudly. "Dong! Dong!" The ground shook, and trees were effortlessly knocked down as if they were mere blades of grass, as the giant Spartacus bore down on them with an overwhelming force, charging toward Iskandar. "Go, Spartacus! Claim victory!" Shirou shouted inwardly, his heart filled with anticipation. "It's over! It's over!" Waver's heart trembled. The giant charged at them with relentless force, while the thunderstorm raged on with such ferocity that it seemed intent on consuming everything in its path. Iskandar, however, remained unfazed. He turned to Waver and asked calmly, "Have you ever lived in a big world, kid?" Frustrated, Waver exclaimed, "You fool! How can you still expect to teach me anything? Haven't you seen what's happening right now?" Iskandar let out a loud, booming laugh and raised the sword of the king high above his head. "I am Iskandar, the king of conquest," he proclaimed. "Tell me, what is conquest? What does it truly mean to conquer?" Confusion was etched on Waver's face. Iskandar's words seemed like a question directed at someone, yet there was no one else there except themselves and their enemies in the midst of battle. Who was Iskandar asking? Was it the sky, the earth, or perhaps Waver himself? The young mage couldn't help but wonder as he looked on in bewilderment. Just as he was about to try to persuade Iskandar to focus, a sandstorm began to brew, rising up around them and engulfing everything in its path. "Here it comes!" Shirou's heart tightened as Spartacus instinctively came to a stop beside him. Terrorizing magical energy enveloped the area, and in an instant, the world around them changed. The forest, which had been ravaged by Spartacus and Iskandar, disappeared, replaced by a raging sandstorm and an army of soldiers that seemed intent on laying waste to the earth. "What is conquest?" Iskandar asked. "Raise nations to the ground, raise our own to the skies, all for the sake of conquest." The soldiers' voices were uniform, as if they were one entity, and their cries seemed to tear apart the very fabric of the world. Shirou was shocked. A sense of vastness enveloped his small and ordinary heart, as if it covered the sky and earth, and he couldn't help but be moved by the sheer scale of it all. "Is this Ionioi Hetairoi?" Iskandar asked again, his voice ringing out clear above the chaos. "What is conquest?" "Crush armies beneath us, raise our own to new heights, all in the name of conquest." Waver surveyed the endless sea of people, so dense that it felt like a temple fair. Yet their voices were so uniform and their wills united, as if they could tear apart the earth and sky in pursuit of their goal. It was as if they were all chasing after the end of the starry sea, driven by a singular purpose. "What is conquest?" Iskandar asked again. "The creed of conquest is to vanquish and triumph, to crush the weak and elevate the mighty." Iskandar hoisted himself onto his steed, brandishing his sword. He bellowed, "What is our ultimate goal?" "The end of the starry sea! The end of the starry sea! The end of the starry sea!" The entire crowd and soldiers were shouting at the top of their lungs. They were like zealots in pursuit of enlightenment, their eyes burning with passion for their cause. With his sword held aloft, Iskandar directed it toward Spartacus and shouted, "Kill! Kill!" The sound was a unified, thunderous roar, sharp and piercing like a sword slicing through the sky. The army advanced, the overwhelming might of humanity causing the earth and sky to tremble. They will perish. They will certainly perish. If Spartacus dares to break through like this, he's certain to meet his death. Shirou's eyes were filled with wariness. He had not expected the king's army to be so formidable. He had underestimated them. He clenched his jaw and, without hesitation, merged with the Saint Graph, his body instantly overflowing with surging magical energy. Simultaneously, wisdom of mortal kicked in, causing Iskandar's momentum to diminish abruptly, and even the soldiers' fervor to slightly wane. In contrast, Spartacus's body grew even more robust, his aura surging outward like tidal waves, with him as the epicenter, causing the gravel within a 5-meter radius to shake. "Just as I suspected, it's you, Caster." Iskandar laughed cheerfully. It appeared that he had already deduced Shirou's identity from the beginning, but he didn't seem to mind. The king who held the fate of the world in his hands had greater ambition and greed than anyone else. His heart was as vast as the world he had conquered. Shirou summoned forth a torrent of magical energy, harnessing the raw power of his 27 immature magic circuits. With fierce determination, he projected the massive sword that had once been wielded by Gilgamesh to subdue the legendary gladiator, Spartacus. The sword materialized in a brilliant blaze of light, its razor-sharp edges glinting menacingly as it hovered in the air, ready to unleash destruction at Shirou's command. Of course, he could not fully materialize the giant sword. Instead, he could only project a sword that was a mere fraction of its size, measuring at a mere 15 meters in length. Though it shared the same shape as the original, it was inferior in terms of power and strength. Exhausted, Shirou handed the sword over to Spartacus and shouted, "Spartacus, use this sword to vanquish the oppressors!" Oh, yo! Spartacus grasped the giant sword with the strength of an ancient giant and charged into the ranks of the enemy army. With swift and powerful strokes, he swept his sword through the throngs of soldiers, leaving a trail of death and destruction in his wake. Those who dared to stand in his way were met with a swift and merciless end, either falling to the ground dead or writhing in agony from their injuries. The battlefield shook with the ferocity of his assault as he cut a swath of carnage through the enemy ranks. Iskander shouted loudly, "Change formation 4! Assault the giant blocking our path!" In the blink of an eye, the tide of battle shifted. The king's army adapted its strategy to counter Spartacus's rampage. Heavily armored soldiers stepped forward to form a wall of defense, while archer soldiers positioned behind them quickly drew their bows and unleashed a barrage of arrows towards Spartacus. The relentless hail of projectiles rained down upon him. Oh! Spartacus was peppered with arrows, yet his face still bore a serene, loving smile. The more he was injured, the more powerful the magical energy that his body emitted. At this moment, his body had swelled to 15 meters, and every time it grew, wisdom of mortal would amplify its momentum. The heat emanating from Spartacus's massive frame was intense, like a steaming airflow that made the air around him uncomfortably hot. He held the giant sword projected by Shirou with ease. The sword glinted in the light like a beam of moonlight as he swung it with precision and power, cutting the enemies with deadly efficiency. His movements were deadly as he carved a path of destruction through the ranks of the king's army. Kacha, 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 kacha. Ah. Accompanied by the screams of the soldiers, the heavy armor of the heavily armored soldiers was no match for Spartacus's raw strength. With a single sweep of his sword, he cleaved through their defenses as if they were made of butter, leaving them unable to even put up a momentary resistance. The soldiers, who had thought themselves invincible in their heavy armor, were now nothing more than corpses on the battlefield. The corpses and the sea of blood mixed together, forming a gruesome and macabre scene of death and destruction. The once ordered ranks of the king's army were now nothing more than a disordered mass of bodies, torn apart by the relentless onslaught of Spartacus. The ground was slick with blood, the air thick with the stench of death. It was a human meat grinder. Shirou was aghast. Waver was horrified. Such a vast world, whether it was Shirou as an ordinary individual or Waver who was entrenched in his small inner world, neither had ever seen or experienced anything like it before. "Welcome to the real world of conquest." Iskander laughed boisterously and then swung his sword and shouted, "Change formation 11." The king's army changed formation once more. The heavy soldiers cleared a direct path to Iskander. Spartacus shouted loudly, his spirit high as he charged toward Iskander. "Fool! Fool! Fool! How could you open the formation?" Waver was terrified. Staring at the giant who had swelled to 15 meters like a mountain, he was paralyzed with fear. Iskander's expression remained unchanged. Even a hint of joy was present on his face. "Kacha!" As Spartacus rushed towards Iskander, a strange sound echoed, and then the ground suddenly gave way with a series of cracks. The cave-in swallowed Spartacus whole, leaving only his head visible. It turned out that when the heavy armor troops were massacred by Spartacus, there was already a troop that had set up traps around the battlefield. Iskandar, with a sword in hand, stepped on the head of Spartacus, who was now trapped in the quicksand, and plunged his sword into the right eye of the mad warrior. Cha! Blood mixed with tears spurted out, coating his cheek in red. Iskandar laughed triumphantly. "This is my world, my domination, my conquest. Berserker, did you feel it?" Ah! Spartacus's magical energy surged, his body expanding to over 20 meters. He reached out from the quicksand trap and struggled to climb out, wielding his huge sword in a frenzy and injuring anyone in his path. The battlefield was a scene of carnage, with dead bodies strewn everywhere. Blood flowed like a river. The ground was trampled and crushed, littered with minced organs and viscera. Severed limbs and broken bodies were visible as far as the eye could see. This was a barbaric world, a world of conquest, a primal, wild world of men that had existed since ancient times. In this world, civilization, morality, good and evil, all of those things that people hold dear, disappeared. Words were meaningless, strategies were pointless, and only the most primitive wildness existed in the blood of men. In this world, there is only one rule: conquer or be conquered. Ha ha ha! Iskandar, surrounded by his heavy troops, laughed triumphantly. To him, fighting, bloodshed, and cruelty were the most genuine things in the world of men vying for dominance. Spartacus had grown even stronger, towering over his enemies like an ancient giant. With ease, he killed a group of soldiers and trampled another to death. Even the heat he exhaled was enough to blow over a circle of soldiers. But it was clear that he was reaching his limit. Yes, reaching his limit. The body that was brewing with magical energy had begun to riot and was gradually approaching the point of self-destruction. Shirou did not know if Spartacus's self-destruction could destroy the king's army. As in the Nasuverse, Spartacus had never fought Iskandar to the death. Despite his valiant efforts, Spartacus was unable to defeat the king's army, which controlled over 5 million square kilometers. He knew that a hero who rises up in rebellion would have even less chance of defeating the empire's tyranny. But it's not just about having swords and shields, but also about having keen eyes and quick wits. Shirou understood that swords and shields protect the eyes and the brain, and the eyes and brain also protect the swords and shields. He inhaled deeply before slowly raising his arm. "I am the bone of my sword." His voice was steady and resolute. The chant of unlimited blade works flowed effortlessly from his lips as he fell into a trance-like state. In his mind's eye, he saw a solitary figure clad in scarlet, standing tall and proud amid a sea of gears that seemed to stretch on endlessly, like the inner workings of a vast industrial machine. Without a doubt, this is a record of the heroic spirit Emiya within the Saint Graph that has been aroused. What is this? Iskandar furrowed his eyebrows, looking at Shirou with interest. "Are you going to use your noble phantasm caster?"